All right, I am just waiting for that little tiny wheel to stop and let me know that we are good and we are live, which it looks like we are. Hey everyone, welcome. It is Sunshine, the pink-haired sober witch, and I'm incredibly excited to be here doing this deep dive. We are in the second round. I think I've done this a couple of times, but we're like smack dab into, starting to get into the meat of this stuff. And so I'll just give you a little bit of heads up. If you're catching this for the first time, there's another episode you're going to want to go check out. And if you are catching this for, the multiple times, just remember we're here every month. We're going to be diving deep into the different recovery tools for witches every single month. And I hope that you come back. Yeah, so the witch's path to recovery. You might be wondering, if you just stumbled across this, who am I? So we'll start with that. I said, I'm Sunshine, the pink-haired sober witch. My own sobriety date, the date that I stepped into recovery was October 9th of 2019. And, just a little bit about my story. It's been, if you do the math, it's been over 5.5 years. And I relapsed, I think, twice that year. Twice. uh, you know, I don't know. I don't know that if it's ever truly recovery if you don't experience what it feels like to have to face a relapse. Um, but October 9th was just different. I knew that I wanted to be in recovery. I knew that I wanted a different way. I knew that I wanted a different life, and I was willing to figure out whatever it is that I needed to do to get that. And I started by going to AA. I made a commitment to my partner at that time because I was quite the douchebag, when I hit that final relapse. But I made a commitment to my partner to do 90 meetings in 90 days. And I did. I sat at the tables of AA for 90 meetings in 90 days, and I continued even beyond that. But it didn't take very long for something to feel a little bit off, something to just not quite sit with me right, just something was a little bit weird about it. And I just, in reflection now of looking back, I was just different. My spiritual beliefs were different. There was nothing wrong with anything that they shared. And as a matter of fact, there was a lot of things that I felt that were really right. But there were just other pieces that I wanted to talk about, other things that I wanted to do. And I think the real mind bender for me was after almost 4 months and finally getting a sponsor, as they say that you should, doing the right thing, doing everything that I was told, it took about another month and a half before that sponsor told me I kind of blew their mind, and that my own spiritual beliefs were so different. Uh, they were starting to question and wonder what their own were, you know? So, yeah, it was just a tough space. That's a little bit about me. That's why I have created the Witch's Way to Recovery, right? And so I'm incredibly excited to share this with you just a little bit because we can't go into everything in an hour, but we're going to share as much as we can in that time together. So let's start first. I'm slowing down. We're just going to take 3 intentional deep breaths just to ground ourselves in this moment, in this time together. I don't know about you, but being in recovery, I really love when someone reminds me to slow down, just to be present, just to be grounded. So much of my recovery was learning how to be in my body. So these moments when I intentionally take some deep breaths and allow myself to settle in are really important. So we are going to open up and cast a circle in our space, and space and time is construct by humans. So we're going to cast this circle so that it extends into every space that it needs to be throughout all the time that it needs to be. Okay. And we're going to do so here today, now that our candle has been lit. By reciting the witch's serenity prayer. O divine universe, grant me the power of water to accept with ease and grace whatever it is that I cannot change. The power of fire to evoke the courage that I need to change each and every one of those things that I truly can. And the power of air for the clarity to know the difference. And the power of earth to stay grounded in my highest vibrational path. That path that is leading me on my recovery. Hmm. As I said, we are talking about the witches recovery tools, and very specifically, right? Because there's a good number of them that I have created, and I'm not shy to say, like, I tapped into the traditional 12 step because the traditional 12 step is going to be familiar to so many individuals that have stepped into recovery, right? So I said, how can I make something that might already be familiar with folks and embrace the path of the witch within them, right? These are witch specific. We've stripped the Christian overtones, right? It's beautiful if that's your own spiritual beliefs. And even if you're a Christian witch, incorporate them in there, right? But we've added in magical tools, we've added in magical practices, practices that are more familiar with the witch, right? This inner knowing, our psychic gifts, the power to be able to transmute shadows into light and to do magic, right? And last but not least, to still be of service to this world, right? To the humans, to the animals, to the spirits, whatever it is that we're called to be, our family. Maybe we're a mother, father, and your service to this world is to raise those children, whatever it may be. So we're going to dive into those, but very specifically, let's just see. I've got some notes. Well, I can touch on this. This is why I take these notes because there's some points that hit me as I'm preparing. Spiritual resonance in recovery matters, right? Recovery needs to feel aligned to that spirit, right? Because the recovery is about the mind, it is about the body, and it is about the spirit. And we can go and we can work with a mental health professional and we can deal with the mind, right? There are certain behavioral patterns, there are certain thought patterns that kind of, we stumble into when it comes to, addiction, codependency, trauma, whatever it is that you might be recovering from, right? Same thing from a body. There are certain body related items that we tend to fall into. So a medical doctor, a nutritionist, a somatic practitioner, they're going to be able to help you from that bodied perspective. But if you aren't incorporating all three of these, right, then there's something that's going to be missing. And my personal belief is deep down, the root cause of addiction is a spiritual disease, right? And it's there, right? Spiritual addiction, even some of the trauma, when we think about folks that have been impacted by trauma from a generational perspective, right? When they've had it passed down through generations and generations, right? That's the spirit that's held on to it, right? Often we continue to suffer and struggle with either our addiction, our codependency, or even our trauma because we are lacking a true north. We're lacking a purpose, right? We're lacking this self-worth. We're lacking confidence to approach life. And these are all things that are related to that spirit, right? All things that are related to that spirit. And there are some mental health professionals that are going to bleed over into that spirit side. But when we start talking about consciousness, we're getting really close to the divine. I'd really be curious for any of you that are watching, listening, you can always drop it into the comments down below, but how many of you visited the AA tables or the NA tables and felt the same? Felt like it made sense, but there was just something that seemed to be lacking, and it was that spiritual kind of connection. Yeah. We've got some folks that are watching live, and it just, I loved so much of what they had to share, so much, but there was just something, and I won't. I've shared it other times, but just even the reaction that I got some of the times when I would speak my truth, um, the eyeballs, the like weird uncomfortableness that I would get. Yeah. So we're diving in further into the Witch's 13 Steps to Recovery, and we're specifically going to be focusing on step 3 and 4. Right? So, step 3, aligning with universal flow, right? Allowing our intuition, our spirit guides, the gods, the goddesses. They would call this the higher power in AA or NA or any of the 12-step programs. And you might still kind of refer to this, but it's a little different to me. And I'm going to dive into that, right? And then engaging in shadow work. And this in the traditional program is going to be when you're writing that moral inventory, and it went really weird for me. It did. I did all the 12 steps. I did what I was supposed to do in the traditional. And just every time something would feel off, something would feel different, something would feel just like, head scratching of like, why does this feel so weird? Right? I mean, space and time. And maybe it was because some other future sense of me knew that it needed to change. So let's start, my dear friends, with step 3, right? My spirit has me pausing to make a point here. When we talk about steps, there's often this indication of this linear order of things, 1, 2, 3. I mean, that's why we associated numbers to it. And though it may be helpful, right? Though when we are really in the throes of our suffering, having a very detailed plan of what steps to take can be very helpful, right? This is exactly what you do next. Any of these steps can be stepped into at any particular time if your guides, if your intuition, if your, deep inner knowing tells you, right? Which gets us into step 3, aligning with that universal flow, right? I choose to embrace my psychic gifts and allow the universe to direct my spiritual path without any interference. And you could say my spirit guides, my ancestors, the angels, the gods and the goddesses that I work with, my higher self. You can put whatever you want, right? But you are literally leaning into your psychic gifts and your connection to that external, as AA would say, whatever is outside of yourself, you're leaning into those psychic gifts to show you, right? And when we've been in our addiction or our codependency or our trauma, when we've been in the thick of it, we may have resisted this guidance. We may even have been overwhelmed by our own gifts and numbed because of them. This is something that I realized, right? Looking back, a lot of my alcohol use was in social settings. I don't think that's uncommon, right? But a lot of it was in social settings. It was, a social lubricant, as people would say. But for me, what it really was, it was a way to quiet all of that noise, right? My psychic gifts have been strong since I was a child, right? I can hear people's thoughts. I can feel people's energies. I can hear spirit. I can see spirit, if I choose to, right? And so imagine walking into a room of 20 people and hearing all of their thoughts, hearing all their spirit guides, hearing, feeling everything that everybody's feeling. I didn't know how to handle it. So I drank. Some people may eat. Some people may lean on to someone else and that codependent, have to be hand in hand with them, can't venture off on their own. And some people might not even be able to walk into the room because of whatever the experiences that they've had in the past, right? Step 3 says to lean into that and not be afraid of it. It does require some work to protect yourself so that you're not overwhelmed, right? Those go hand in hand, but you need to be open and aligned to that, to your gifts. Believe in them. And I know some of you may be thinking, nah, not me. I don't have them, right? And I call bullshit. Every single one of us has psychic abilities, and we can tap into them at any given time without the use of divinatory tools. Don't get me wrong, I use tarot cards, I use a pendulum. I've got dowsing rods, I've got ruins, I've used, spirit boards. You can use them, but you do not need them. Your gifts are strong enough themselves. You have to practice them regularly, though, by listening to what we see, what we hear, what we feel, or what we just know, and trusting. The most important step is being willing to trust in these gifts that you've been given. The more you fight them, the more you second guess them, the closer you're also going to find yourself to a trigger, or worse yet, a relapse. You have to trust that you're being given what you need, that you're being led in the direction that you need to be led in. Right? That when you get an intuitive hit, that it's true. And I know this is harder, a lot harder said than done, or a lot easier said than done, right? I'm not saying that it's just easy, like trust is just going to happen overnight. But it can be built. Allowing the universe to lead us, right? Letting go of that control and listening, right? And when I say listening in this regards, I am talking about listening as far as like paying attention to what we see, the visions. They can show up in our mind's eye. They can show up in our dreams. They can show up uh, they can just show up in the things that we see. I have bunnies mean things to me. So if I see a bunny, I'll start paying attention. And if I see two more within a short period of time, I know that's spirit's way of trying to get my attention, right? So it can be what we see, it can be what we hear. You may hear a whisper, a voice, a knock, a ding, right? You may have, ask someone, did you just call my name? And they're like, no, I didn't call your name, right? The knowing, that's what they call claircognizance. Just knowing someone is not in a good state, knowing someone's hurt, knowing someone's not good for you, right? Not going to raise your vibration. Knowing that going someplace may not be in your best interest, right? You have to trust in these things. Doing so is trusting in our own magic, and it's really important when it comes to like embracing your inner witch. It's really important. This is the magic that's going to be able to lead us wherever it is that we need to. This connection is what's going to take us. And it's really important to know that the universe is always conspiring in our favor. Always, 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 100% of the time. It may not seem like it, right? There may be certain things or situations that you're just like, why me? Right? But the universe truly wants us to be happy. It wants things to be easy. It wants us to be fulfilled. Right? It just does. Your higher self is always like, hey, we want the best for you. It's just a true statement. As a human, though, we love to focus on the things that are chaos and drama, right? We love to make things hard for ourselves. And we actually really love to work towards things. So fulfillment, sometimes we're much more happy. Just keep doing it, keep working towards it, right? Finding ways to not be fulfilled. But if we allow the universe to lead us, if we let go of control, and just listen and pay attention, where we're taken is often going to be grander than we could even have dreamt. Yeah. This is about trusting in the signs and the synchronicities. And I don't know any person that's been on a spiritual path that embraces the witch inside of them that is not familiar with a sign or a synchronicity, right? I saw a feather, I saw a bird, I saw a butterfly. I saw 11:11 on the clock. I saw 1, 2, 3, 4 on my receipt, right? This step 3 is about watching the subtleness of the world around you, being curious. Wonder why that happened. It's recognizing how your body speaks to you and go, oh, wow, I just got a wave of nerves that washed over me. I think that person that I'm about to walk in and meet's just a ball of nervous energy, right? It's removing any of that second guessing of your inner truth. Just what you know is true, right? I have this thought, it's like spirit. I have this thought that'll often comfort me where, I have a very existential view of life that there's not a lot in this world that has the innate permission to tell you your truth besides yourself, right? So if you believe you're psychic, you are. And if you need me to tell you that you are, well, I am. Ah, and this is different than that traditional 12 step again, right? Because it isn't just a higher power that is known as God or a rock or a table or anything of that nature. This is that deep inner knowing within yourself. It is your intuition. It is your spirit guide. It is the universe itself talking to you and leading you, right? I can't emphasize this one enough. I'm reminded, I was writing earlier this afternoon, and it's just a story I've shared before with some folks where, once upon a time I had a client that I'd been working with them on their psychic gifts, and, they've expressed this frustration with me a handful of times, and they're like, God, I really just wish my gifts were as strong as yours. And, I just kind of had to sit there for a second because I was just, A, I feel they're just as gifted as I am, right? I mean, I do. But I finally said to him, I said, the only difference between mine and yours, my gifts and your gifts that I see? And I said, what? I said, I require trusting in mine to stay in recovery. I can't not trust in them. Step 3 is incredibly important. I would say, probably the most potent one for me because it's helped me and assisted me in all of the other ones. So, your tool for step 3, write your own surrender prayer and recite it daily. Ask the universe, your guides, spirit, gods, goddesses, whoever it is that you need to guide you. Surrender to them. I do that every single day, in some way, shape, or form. Sometimes it's brushing my teeth, I'm sitting there reciting it in my head. Sometimes it's while I'm stretching. And I said, I ask them to take over the wheel, allow me to be a passenger in the passenger seat, to let go of all control and to just enjoy life. I do it. The second piece is pull a tarot card to see what insight they may have for you. Pull an oracle card, right? Start leaning into your psychic gifts in some way, shape, or form on a daily basis. And like I said, I'm not saying you can't use any of those divinatory tools. Those are beautiful tools that were given to the witch to be able to incorporate into their psychic practices, but you don't need them, right? You don't need them. So that's your witchy tool for step 3. All right. Step 4. Hmm. Oh, step four. I don't know, once again, how many of you went through the traditional 12 step and actually got into working the steps. Like sometimes people are very turned off in the beginning, but this is one that a lot of people will talk about in a traditional 12 step program. It's a big deal, and I think it's still a big deal for a witch. This is engaging in shadow work, right? I commit to deep, honest shadow work, uncovering the hidden aspects of myself that need healing. I seek out those buried wounds, bringing the light to them with courage and rituals of release, allowing growth to flourish, right? This is important as well, right? This is admitting to the things that you may have never admitted before, right? The discomforts, the angers, the sadness, the upsetness, the joys, the desires, whatever it may be, right? Sometimes it is desires like, oh my goodness, I really, really desire to be, tied up by my partner. I have this fantasy that I just want. I just been thinking about it over and over again, right? And it can also be, I don't want to go to Easter dinner anymore, right? Like I can't stand my family and how they bicker and, you know, belittle each other. It's being really truthful with yourself. That's the beautiful thing about that step three that we just talked about, because the more and more you strengthen that, the more and more your guides are going to start showing you the bits and pieces of shadow work that you can start working on that are going to be the most potent for you to face. Yeah, it's kind of a beautiful thing. It's not punishment, okay? But it can be very uncomfortable because it is a very powerful tool for healing and reclaiming parts of ourselves. And depending upon how deep your addiction ran, codependency, your trauma, like depending on how deep of suffering you fell into, the healed side of you may be completely different. Completely different, right? Hmm. I've got this note down to share one of my stories, and I know which one that they wanted me to share earlier. Um, when I first stepped into recovery, as you heard me mention, I was with someone, and they themselves struggled with addiction. Their drug of choice was an opiate. And then second to that was anything else that they could get their hands on to abuse. And when I first stepped into recovery, I'd asked them after a couple of weeks, I said, listen, I really love a partner in crime. And if I'm going to stay on this path, I, I can't be with someone that drinks, you know? I'd already tried to allow him to. And that was a truth of mine. And it was hard because with these gifts that were starting to fire up, all of these psychic gifts, like I knew it was going to be difficult for him. I knew that when he told me he wasn't going to do it, that he still was. He would just lie. And things started to struggle, over the course of that next year. We ended up into the pandemic because I got sober in 2019, and the pandemic just strained his mental health and his addiction pretty hard. And I knew as I was putting more and more boundaries up to keep myself safe in that relationship, as I was finding the places to be able to love him and myself at the same time, I ultimately knew that as long as he was not willing to face his own addictions and his own behaviors and his own mental health challenges, that I would have to part ways with him. And this was somebody that I loved very dearly, who taught me what love, like what it was like to actually be loved for who I was. He was amazing at loving me. He was horrible at loving himself. And it took me a year. It took me a whole year of facing all of these shadows and these things that were coming up as that relationship and ending like all of these things in that first year of recovery, by a whole year, almost a year to the day when I told him that I couldn't be with someone that drank, that I had to ask him to leave, to move out. And the hardest part was I knew that if he did, I should say when he did, it wouldn't be long that he walked this earth, you know. And that sucked. It can be very uncomfortable to do the shadow work. You can have memories come up. You can have other things that you've buried start to come up, right? The more and more you uncover and get in touch with who you truly are and what matters, the more you're honest with yourself, the lies that were piled on top start to dissipate and allow more truths to come through. And some of those truths may be hard to face, right? And I go back to that step 3. And if you have surrendered, if you've leaned into those gifts, you will be guided where you need to go safely. Yeah, I did put it up there. It was. That first year was really rough. There was a lot of trying to take care of myself. And I'm I'm very grateful for his love, and I'm sad that he's no longer with us. Um, but I'll never regret, that healing journey, because he, just as I did what I needed to do, I gave him the chance and the opportunity to do the same. I wished he would have chosen me differently, but we all fight our own demons, and his was tough. That shadow work is not always going to be easy, but I promise you, if you're willing to do the work, it will be worth it. This one is different from the traditional fourth step, because that fourth step in the traditional program talks about doing a moral inventory of the things that you've done to other people, places, things, right? And I'm not saying that it's not good to reflect on all of that and that it's not important to reflect, but ultimately you're trying to reclaim the powerful, healthy witch that you know you can be, right? So, for example, when I did my inventory, I felt like I was trying to make things up of shitty things that I'd done. When in reality, most of the shitty things that I had done were to myself, betraying who I was, neglecting my self-care, neglecting, my own happiness, neglecting, you know, all of these things about myself, who I was, who I wanted to be, what was important to me, always deprioritizing myself. I didn't have a list of a bunch of shit that I'd done. I had a handful, right? I'm not saying I was perfect, but the list of things that I did to myself was worse. The witch's fourth step in working in that shadow work is an act of self-compassion and spiritual truth, right? My belief is, in order to reclaim that beautiful, powerful, amazing, incredible inner witch that you are, that you have within you, you have got to face these things about yourself first. You must focus on how you've been neglecting being your own your own, like, most amazing self, whatever that is, whatever that truth is for you. Oh, here's your witchy tool for step 4. Start being honest. Start being honest with your yeses and with your nos, meaning do not agree to do something you don't really want to do, and only do what actually makes you happy. My first year into recovery was this one, and boy, did I piss a lot of people off. A lot of people off, especially my parents, they wanted me to go places, do things, and I was just like, nope, 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 right? And I did. I just started doing the things that I enjoyed doing. And I wanted to bake and I wanted to paint and I wanted to do crafts and art and teach and learn and study. And I wanted to do all of these amazing things. I mean, I had time and money now, right? I was no longer drinking, so I had time to do other things. And I wasn't spending money on alcohol, so I had money to do other things. And so that's what I did. My whole first year was focusing on this particular one, saying no when I meant no and yes when I meant yes. It's a very, very powerful tool. I always emphasize and stress this daily ritual is going to be your most potent. So, whether it is that you do that prayer, whether it is you pull a tarot card, whether it is that you practice the yes and the no, on doing something on a daily basis, right? And I think that's why that 90 meetings in 90 days became so um, beneficial to people and even to me, right? It's because it grounds you into a new habit, into a new ritual, right? It centers you on what you are there and meant to be doing, right? It's this place, right? This ritual. If you put this ritual around your recovery, it's a moment every single day that you align yourself back with what you're actually trying to do. Channeling purpose and intention. And it doesn't have to be complicated. I think a lot of times when people think of being a witch, they think of needing all this, the spell jars, the ingredients, the stones, the candles, the flowers, the oils. It doesn't have to be complicated. You have every single tool that you need within your physical body. Like we are made up of all of those pieces of the earth, of the air, of the fire, of water and spirit. So you don't need anything else but yourself, right? So make a daily ritual that is aligned to your recovery. Find something that resonates with you. Yeah. So recovery as a witch, it's just different, my dear friends. It's just different. I'll open the floor to see if there's any other questions, anything that we covered, or any comments. You can drop them into the chat box. Not, not on the audience. Reminder, my dear friends, you can join us again next month. We're going to keep diving deeper into the recovery tools specifically created for a witch. And if you happen to be ready for some more, right? If you're watching this and you're ready for some more of this, you want to dive further, you want to jump ahead, I'd always encourage you to download the Sober Witch Life mobile app. It's the only recovery app made for witches by witches, and it's free, home of the free Sober Witches Toolkit. So yes, you'll get the 13 witches in there. But you'll also get some of the other recovery tools that I've created as well. And if you are like even, more gung-ho about kind of joining and jumping all in, we do are accepting applications into the Recovery Coven. So you can always visit illuminateUnschooled.com, check it out. And this is a sacred place for witches that are recovering from all sorts of various different things. And we want to embrace our magic to do so. So that being said, my dear friends, until next time, I hope you have a beautiful next 28-ish days. All right, Barb.